This is Doug Howard with Growth Team Strategies, and I'm here with my strong-willed, my insightful yet strong-willed co-host, Kathi Fleck. Kathi, how are you today?
I'm fine.
How are you? You seem, yeah. I'm a little emotional today, so I'm going to try not to go anywhere I shouldn't go. Anyhow, we are talking today about a little bit of a regroup and about where we're headed with this podcast, Selling the Dream. So, we've done about 32, 33 episodes, something like that. We're here every week. And the whole idea behind the podcast is really to talk about the things business owners should be thinking about, not when they're right at the moment of wanting to sell, because frankly, even though there are some things you can do, that's pretty late in the game, right? But to really be thinking about the things you want to do when that's even on the horizon. If we don't have a clear successor, and sometimes even if we do, right, the idea that we're going to have to take this out and do something with this business. But if we don't have a clear successor, if we don't have a son or a daughter, or a leadership team or whatever that's going to step in, and we're not just going to let the business wind down and die at the end of the last project we do, we got to contemplate the fact that at some point we're going to be ready to move on. And I believe most businesses are sellable if they have a good reputation, a methodology for doing business, and some flow of business to sell. So, Kathi, I know when you started, a lot of people thought, your business really wasn't even that sellable because of the nature of it, because of the way it was structured, the size, right? So tell us a little bit about that. Why were you getting that feedback from folks, do you think?
Well, I wasn't did not have a high revenue. It was under 2 million. And I was the face of the company, had a small team. It was a husband-wife team at the time, and with some staff. And so I think just talking to peers, they just felt that it wasn't any big company to sell. But I was approached by the mergers and acquisitions company that I did go with, and they're the ones who instigated the relationship and had the valuation done. And so I had an idea that I could sell the business. But also being in remodeling, I know the reputation of remodelers is really not to sell the business. They were not selling for very many companies were not selling. So I think there was always that hurdle of, could the business sell? Did I even have anything to sell? And what would happen if I was pulled out of the business? So there were a lot of question marks there.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people go through that. And, remodeling is certainly one of those areas. I think anywhere where there's a service business, right, there's a belief that, is the business really more about me? Could it be reproduced by somebody else? Would the cash flow continue? It's funny when someone owns a restaurant, right, and they get to the end of wanting to own that restaurant, they don't have any question about whether or not it could potentially at least be the kind of business that could be sold, right? Or if they're manufacturing something. I think this is a phenomenon that really ties very closely to being in a service business, especially one where the business owner themselves have played a really big role, right? So, but I think people should recognize, if you've got a business concept, if you have trade partners, if you have a methodology, if you've been marketing to a particular market for 10, 15, 20 years, the fact is somebody is going to be trying to build a business in that industry that would presumably benefit from acquiring your business, at least potentially, right? And so getting this notion of, I think every business at least needs to be looked at as being potentially sellable. The vast majority I look at have more sellability than I think a lot of business owners believe. And you got to sort of downplay the naysayers, right? Everybody will tell you, their opinion on things, and sometimes they're just wrong, and you hear like, well, you hear from 2 or 3 people, hey, you got nothing to sell. It's a husband and wife business. It's located on your property. What are you going to do after the last job? And it's like, I mean, those things all sound good, but it's really not the reality. You know what I mean? It's not the only reality. But then the other question is, how do we get ready? How do we start to know that we might even want to sell, right? And so you and I had very different experiences, right? You were very intent on selling at a certain point for a certain amount of money, a certain outcome. Mine came much more up as a matter of circumstance, right? What was going on in the industry, what was going on in my life, what was going on around me. And in both cases, we came to the determination that, yeah, I want to sell the business, right? So when did you know that, Kathy, that
That
you
I
wanted to
wanted
see?
to sell the business.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange, but when I started the business and it was in 2007, I knew then that I wanted to sell the business. And I knew
Okay.
then that I wanted it for seven figures. And it just came out of the sky. It's not like, oh, I thought I could build something and I worked towards it. It was just something that I just fell on me, I guess. And so I think that was always in the back of my mind. It wasn't actually in the forefront at all. But then as I started getting more involved with remodeling and especially being with Remodelers Advantage and that I started understanding that remodeling companies just didn't sell. And so I didn't know that my business would sell. And then as I started putting the processes together and had a valuation done in 2017, um, I started working a little bit more diligently towards that. But it wasn't until my financials were evaluated and I also brought them up to my CPA that people started telling me, people in the financial world started telling me that I could sell my business. My peers didn't think it would be worth that much because I wasn't a really big player. Um, but I always had a good bottom line. The processes were being developed. And so um, it just happened to work out for me. But I think a lot of people, and even myself, thinking that, did I really have a viable business to sell? I think that's a lot of people think that.
Yeah. But for you, that was really the intent from the very beginning.
It was. It was just something that I wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So with me, I actually bought an existing business, so it wasn't foreign to me that at some point we would be on the other side of that. But I think I was probably maybe 47, 48 years old at the time. I wasn't looking to make a big career change. Although I fundamentally did not enjoy the kind of work we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I started working for an accounting firm as a marketing director and then as a consultant and then as a bunch of other things. But I ended up owning an accounting company. I wasn't an accountant, right? And so, we got all the training and certifications. I never became a CPA, but you didn't have to be to do bookkeeping and payroll and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I found myself in a business that I didn't really enjoy. And so for me, what happened was there was some personal stuff going on in my life and things like that. And so when I got to that point where it's like, I would be really happy if I could find another iteration to do some of the things I like, but in a very different way. That's when we started the consulting company a couple of years before we sold the accounting company. But then it got a lot easier for me to contemplate, like, hey, as long as I can replace this income, as long as I can, get a benefit from it and sell the business for, a reasonable amount of money, I was ready to make that change. But something clicked in my mind that said, okay, now's the moment, now's the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, but I think my window was much shorter than I would encourage people to have it be, because there are things I could have done to probably prepare better for it in going through that. So, I think one of the things that we've seen, and so, we're certified in the Value Builder program. And Value Builder is a program that was created by a gentleman by the name of John Warlow. He wrote a book called Built to Sell. I looked at how about 50,000 businesses transitioned. And on each one of our episodes going forward, we're going to really focus on one aspect of the Value Builder model, because there's some great tools and ebooks and stories and resources that can be used that really get to the heart of a better way to sell the business and to get ready for it. But what's interesting is that one of the tools, and I believe that you can get a link to it in the description for this particular podcast. When you look at the description and click on See More, I just found out what Seymour was. I thought that was just a name of somebody, but it turned out you can actually see more of what's in the description. In there, though, we have a link to what we call the pre-score. And what the pre-score does is it gives the business owner an opportunity to take a very quick assessment, but it's assessing how ready they are to transition the business. Because the statistics show, if you're selling the business to move on to something or to achieve a goal, like you had a very clear goal in mind of what you wanted to do and roughly when you wanted to do it. For me, it was, I've got to get this business sold to go on to whatever the next iteration of my career is going to be. The people that are doing that, and whether it's to do one of those things or to travel or to spend more time with the grandkids or whatever it is, right? That's going to be something that you're going to be more satisfied with after the sale than if you sell it because you've lost a key employee or the economic conditions are shifting out from under you or you're dealing with health issues or whatever. And sometimes those things are unavoidable. But what we really want is when someone gets ready to sell, they're picking the right time and the right motivation because it's a pretty big transition,
It
right?
is.
I mean, it's not a simple. I mean, isn't it weird the day after you sell?
Yeah, well, I was going through some personal things too, and I did stay on with a company for a little while, and I moved, so I still had a very active, overly active life going on, preparing for the future. But it was really after everything settled down, maybe a year later, that I started having to come up with new things to do because I was always so busy with work and my personal life. So it there was that transition. And I think part of what many people who think about selling are not prepared for is what are they going to do afterwards because so much
Sure.
of their life is centered around their business. So it is something we have to think of. And, a lot of people are busy with other activities, a lot are not. A lot are just very focused around their work.
Yeah,
And so I've talked to others, and they say, "Well, what would I do if I sold my business? This is what I do." So
yeah.
they have to get themselves mentally prepared for the next step.
Well, the good thing is, and we use this now as a criteria to be one of the consultants for growth team strategies. You actually have to have owned a business and grown a business and sold it successfully. So one of the first things they can do is they can consider an exciting career in business consulting, but only if they successfully get through the process. But I'm a little bit of a history nerd, and one of the things that I always find fascinating, regardless of politics or party, is the notion of inauguration day, right? And on inauguration day, we're always focused on the incoming president, right? New beginnings. They're going to give their speech. They're going to have a parade. They're going to be, you know. But if you think about it, inauguration day is pretty weird for the president that's leaving office,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, you literally start the day as the most powerful person in the world, right? And even up until, 12 o'clock rolls around, you could still start a war. You can change some laws. Usually they're pardoning everybody they can think of, which is a whole other story. But the bottom line is you literally start the day in the White House with Air Force One and helicopters and the whole night, like the whole thing. And then you ride up they come over for coffee with the new person that hopefully you get along with reasonably well, but sometimes they don't. You ride up to the Capitol. This person then gives their speech. They get sworn in, and you do what, right? So you're not the president anymore, and they put you on the plane or whatever, and you fly home. And I think like, what must it be like at 5:30 or 6 o'clock at night, the day you're back in your living room, sitting, maybe in a house you haven't been in a while,
Mm-hmm.
and started the day as president of the United States, right?
Now you're
And
forgotten about.
yeah, and then you say like, okay, so honey, do you want to order pizza or what? Like, what do we do? Like, you wake up the next morning and it's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Well, it may be not as dramatic, but when your identity has been, I am XYZ remodeling company, or I am growth team strategies, or I am, and you wake up the next morning and it's like, no, you're not. It's something I think people really need to contemplate. And
True.
so, in that, I think I would encourage people, and we're going to have some people, in our future episodes, we're going to be focusing on one of the themes or tools from Value Builder. We're going to have a guest that has either an advisor to the selling process or has been through the selling process. As we were talking about earlier, most people that are in the selling process, it'd be a great perspective to get. But because a lot of times their team doesn't even know they're in that process, they're probably not going to. I guess we could do that thing where we fuzzy them out like they do with criminals when they interview them on like these crime shows or something. But that'd be kind of weird. I think we're probably not wanting. I'm not even sure we could figure that out technologically. But so the fact is, though, in doing that, we want people to think about like, what are the steps that I can take right now? And the first step is to really contemplate, what does life beyond the business look like? And I think that pre-score is a great place to start. It's
Mhm.
a great place for us to also engage to say, okay, now we got an idea at least of what's on your mind, you know?
I think the other part is for them to start early on, several years before they're going to sell, to start having some other activities in their life, maybe
Yeah.
to travel a little bit more, or engage with family more, or pick up some hobbies that they hadn't done before. And I think that's one of the things that I ended up doing is I had let a lot of things go.
Yeah.
And so I started pulling more of those into my life, a little bit at a time. And I think it does help to have some other activities to get involved in, because the days can be very long if you don't have anything to put into it.
Right. You might get suckered into doing a consulting gig or something, right? You want to be careful of those scams that are out there, right? Those things are easy to fall into. So no, I totally agree with you. Now Kathy, you know me, I love to come up with ancillary services that we could offer, you know. So what if, as people were contemplating selling their business, we offered some growth team strategies, cooking classes, maybe some ballroom dancing, Tai Chi. I mean, Al, our buddy Al, he knows some martial arts stuff. So we could say, listen, if you can't find a hobby, right? Or let's say you've got long lost family members, right? You haven't spoken to your brother or your sister in years. Reach out to Growth Team Strategies. We'll call ahead of time. We'll explain your pre-score. Like I know you don't want to talk to Chuck, but Chuck's got to sell his business. Chuck's going to need somebody to talk to when he's done. So I know, he kind of stole your girlfriend back in high school and blah, blah, blah. But could we get beyond that so that you can, what do you think? I think that could help people get through these difficult times. What do you think?
You starting a counseling therapy session?
I'm just saying I want to I want to round out our services to say, you're going to have life after the business. And if you can't find one, we'll give you one.
I think
We
I
can,
might have to cut this part out.
he might, but it may be the best part. Who knows? We could also, I don't know how hard it is to get people into the witness protection program, but we could actually start over with a whole new identity. Right? But the bottom line is there is a reality to I'm going to wake up someday, the day beyond owning my business, right? And hopefully the transaction's gone well and all those things that we always talk about. But just from the psychology of the business owner, the mental health of the business owner, where their future is, they've got to really think about that because it affects
They do have
the
to think.
right timing of the business. The
But I
business,
don't think that they should stay on with the business because they don't have other things to do.
yeah,
Because my thinking on this is that we as business owners have taken that risk and the responsibility, put a lot of effort into making something profitable, and they should also have the reward of that at the end and keep the legacy going for employees, clients, whatever, and find another life.
yeah. All right. So at a future date, we will announce the various services that we may attach to this whole process. Right now, they're just obviously in the formative stages. But the takeaway today is if you're thinking that at some point you're going to sell the business, even if it's down the road, a great place to start is to go onto our website, go onto the description of the podcast and see more. Find the link to the pre-score, get it taken. You'll get a report back, your score back. Let's start to know where you stand, what you're thinking about is going to best suit you in terms of the right timing to be selling the business. And from there, then we can start thinking about the other things that we're always talking about, which is growing the business and finding people to fill roles that you're in and all those things. But if we get to those things and we really haven't contemplated why you're selling, roughly when you want to sell, and what the conditions need to be to sell and be happy after the sale, I think we're skipping a step, and I think that's where we need to start.
That's a good point. I do think so too.
All right. So we will be back next week with some details of a particular aspect of the Value Builder program and a guest to be named later. But if you find that you're listening to this and you'd like to be part of the conversation, maybe you advise people that have sold, maybe you've sold a business of your own, reach out to us too. Because I think in doing that, we'd like to round out this conversation. There's a lot of different experiences people have had in selling their business, and people can benefit from the stories they hear from you. I always tell people I was at a book signing with one of my favorite authors a couple of weeks ago, Doris Kearns Goodwin. She's written a lot of historical books about presidents like Franklin Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, and some others. And she just wrote a book about the 1960s. And she had a question and answer. People were asking her, like, well, why do you think these times seem so unsettling to us, so challenging? Is it worse than any other time in our history? And she said, the hardest thing for a historian is when you write a history book, while you're writing it, you have to write it for the reader like you don't already know what the outcome is for it to be compelling. Well, the reason we can look back at things like the Civil War or World War II or the Depression or anything else that we've experienced with some measure of, I'm sure it was difficult, but it seemed pretty manageable, is because we know how it turned out.
Good point.
Right. And so that really left an impression on me. And part of the angst, part of the anxiety of this whole selling process is, for most of us, we're going to go through it once. We got to get it right. And we don't know how it's going to turn out.
Right.
And so one of the things that we need to accomplish with Selling the Dream, the work that we do together, the guests that we bring in, the resources, is help people know we don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, but we know how it can turn out. We know how it's turned out for other folks, right? And we're going to apply the best resources so that you're not just going wildly into the unknown and having all that stress and anxiety that goes along with that. We're going to go into it knowing that there actually are some very good tools so we can make it likely, or at least more likely, that we're going to have a good outcome. And I think that needs to be the perspective. To me, that's the exciting part of the work we're doing together.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree that there was that angst. I had that feeling too about, would this even sell? And of course, putting it on the market during the pandemic was even a little bit more difficult. But it just to keep going through the process and letting those who have done it and know what to do guide you through it. I just think that's the biggest takeaway that I had.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it very well. So we'll finish up there. So, Kathi, I appreciate you getting through the whole episode. You didn't do too much laughing, and I didn't do too much crying. So in the whole scheme of things, I'm going to count this as a success, and I'm looking forward to our next episode in about a week or so. Sound good?
Yes.
Are you coming back, or is this?
I'm coming back.
Okay, just to see how it turns out, right? All right. Kathi, thanks so much for being there. Thanks for being part of our team. Doug Howard, Growth Team Strategies, Selling the Dream. If you're thinking about, selling that business somewhere down the road, check us out, help other people find us, and make sure you reach out if there's something we can help with. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Selling the Dream podcast, starring Doug Howard and Kathi Fleck. Both Doug and Kathi have built and sold successful businesses and hope this podcast will help other small business owners do the same. Tune in every week to hear more tips for increasing the value of your company so you get the highest return for your years of hard work when it comes time to sell or transition your business. Can't wait till next week? Check out our website for more information at www.growththemes.com.